For this specific matchup, I will be analyzing both characters from the Legends continuity, excluding all canon statements that contradict the entire narrative, primarily for Aurra Sing. I should also note that I will only be scaling Aurra up until her showings in the Clone Wars and her appearances in the Coruscant Night trilogy, in an attempt to make this fight balanced. This would not be a fair fight if we were describing Aurra Sing from the Legacy of the Force era. With all that out of the way, let's begin. Visas Marr was a Miraluka female of an unspecified age, though based on her portrayal in the game, I would say she is somewhere in her early 20s, putting her at the start of her physical prime. Miraluka were near human in their biology, with a few spare differences. The most notable of these being the Miraluka's lack of physical sight, their sense of vision coming solely through use of the Force. Because of this adaptation, almost all Miraluka possessed a strong connection to the Force, able to even sense the radiant power on other Force wielders. Visas Marr's overall physical attributes were brought to their absolute height through her brutal training with Nihilists, molding her into an elite Sith assassin. Her showings of strength are limited, but she notably held her own in a duel against Meetra Surik at the tail end of her Sith career. While Surik was disconnected from the Force at the time, she was still an extremely accomplished fighter and war hero with comparable strength. Beyond that, she successfully disabled Surik's entire crew prior to this fight, including Atton Rand, a former Jedi killer, and Kreia, though the latter brings some speculation on how much Kreia actually fought back. In the realm of speed, Visas has employed acrobatics into her lightsaber sequences, and has cut her way through armies of Sith droids and beasts outside the tomb of Frida Nad, as well as keeping pace with her master Darth Nihilus. Regarding endurance and durability, Visas had not only endured the horrifying and violent training she had received under Nihilus, but managed to keep fighting against her master despite being fatigued and injured, as well as surviving her injuries against Surik following their duel, though she did receive medical attention after the latter, with Atton Rand even noting that she had possessed numerous injuries and scars prior to her engagement left untreated, her abilities in dark healing allowing her to replenish her stamina and health in the midst of combat or in meditation. However, it should be noted that Visas was a bit of a lightweight when it came to taking injury, despite her endurance, notably collapsing following her fight with Surik, and being the first to break in her fight against Nihilus, a glass cannon combatant, typical of most Sith assassins. Aurra Sing was a near-human female 32 years old by the end of the Clone Wars, still maintaining her physical prime. Her near-human physiology is somewhat unknown, though there is speculation that she may have been part Anzadi in her history. However, for the most part, we do know that she possessed most of the basic biological traits of humans, including their adaptability and hardiness. Adding on to her physical biology, Aurra implanted herself with a cybernetic antenna that fed her information as well as giving her a sixth sense. As a former Jedi Padawan turned elite bounty hunter, Aurra's physical traits were dialed up to their absolute max. Her strength was such that she could contend with Jedi above her own level, notably Shorat Het, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Jax Pavin, has knocked back Asherad Het with a headbutt, and has even bent back the arm of a droideka to make it shoot itself. Speed-wise, Aurra was quite ferocious, noted to move so fast that she was seemingly engulfed in a sphere of green fire, and has evaded intense barrages of blaster fire and contended with low to mid council level Jedi on a consistent basis. Regarding endurance, Aurra has tanked being hit by boulders, as well as multiple blaster wounds, and more notably, kept on fighting despite such injuries, fighting to the bitter end until her last breath slipped away. Both Visas Marr and Aurra Singh were dark assassins still somewhere around their physical primes, and both possessed so many similarities to humans in their biological makeup that adaptational advantages are somewhat negligent to this debate. Aurra's cybernetic antenna is at least worth mentioning, but it won't contribute much to the overall fight. Regarding their advantages over each other in their respective physical fields, both Visas and Aurra are pretty comparable in terms of speed and agility. I would give Aurra the slight advantage over Marr in terms of strength due to having more exposure and consistency in her feats, and in terms of durability and endurance, Singh clearly has a bigger edge, notably tanking and fighting through injury far better than the glass cannon that is Visas Marr. All in all, while both are close in terms of traits, it is the latter who holds just a few more cards. I award the edge to Aurra Singh for physical attributes and capabilities. Visas Marr was first and foremost a force wielder, who came from a master who was first and foremost a force wielder. Despite this, she still proved to be an absolute menace when it came to the blade, and certainly an expert in her own right, her skills second only to her rage and pain. While her chosen lightsaber form is not confirmed in any sources, we do have enough to make an educated guess. Her more focused specialization on the Force makes me believe that she most likely practiced the first variation of Form 6 Nyman, first laid out by Rob Terra, in which she used her lightsaber combat as a supplement to her Force abilities. However, I also believe she possessed some skill in Form 2 Makashi, based on her in-game choreography. She is shown using many piercing thrusts and slashes to belittle her opponent's guard, while opening them up for her use of Force attacks. During her training with Meetra Surik and Kreia, Visas helped spar with the Jedi Exile, as they practiced the various forms of lightsaber combat, meaning that Marr, at the very least, had a basic application of all 7 forms of lightsaber combat. Her overall approach to combat was more in line with a serpent, subtly undermining their guard with minimal and economy-efficient movements, along with a strong implementation of Force abilities, defensively employing basic counters and parries to keep the enemy at bay. While this style of combat was very effective at efficiently and quickly breaking an opponent before engaging them, defeating them with minimal force, it also left Marr opened up and overwhelmed against straightforward and more overbearing offensive assaults. Visas Marr has 2 primary lightsaber battles against other trained Force wielders that we have for analysis, her duels with both her Jedi and Sith masters, Meetra Surik and Darth Nihilus. Against Surik, Visas began by disabling the Jedi Exile's party, before attacking the former Jedi aboard her ship. The two traded a brief skirmish before Surik successfully injured Marr and destroyed her lightsaber. Now, many may be quick to bash Marr's defeat, considering the fact that Meetra had been cut off from the Force and was only just regaining her connection to it. However, I would not be so quick to judge. Consider the fact that Surik had arguably been the 3rd or 4th best fighter among the Jedi during the Mandalorian Wars, and even without her connection to the Force, she still possessed her elite fighting skill. Consider her lack of Force abilities in the same vein as Ula Keldroma during his fight against Silvar. Against Darth Nihilus, Visas was backed up by both Surik as well as Mandalore the Preserver, with the Exile successfully weakening Nihilus by resisting his use of Force Drain. Despite this, the 3 combatants were extremely injured and overpowered by the lone Sith Lord, with Marr being the first to break. However, once she successfully broke her link to Nihilus, weakening him did the Jedi team reclaim the advantage, eliminating the Sith Lord. Tactically, Visas was somewhat hit or miss, her overall approach being that of an assassin, employing hit-and-run ambush tactics to disable her opponents before effectively removing them. However, when dropped into a fight cold, her approach became much more straightforward. In short, Visas Marr's overall approach to lightsaber combat was that of a Sith assassin. Her primary effort in combat was to employ hit-and-run tactics to quickly undermine and remove an opponent before moving on to the next with an ambush. Her use of overwhelming power coming in the form of her Force abilities. Her serpent-like style was extremely effective at undermining and countering one's guard and keeping them on their toes. However, when met by the overwhelming power of a monstrous assault or someone who could effectively counter and employ her own tactics against her, she could get into trouble very quickly. Aurra Sing was considered to be one of the most deadly and highly skilled bounty hunters and Jedi killers of her day. As the apprentice of the famed Jedi Master Anya Kura, Aurra was produced into one of the best lightsaber duelists among her peers. Beyond that, both the Jedi Masters Sharad Het and Kiadi Mundi made note of the Dark Jedi's elite skill with the blade, and Jango Fett went on to consider her among the deadliest killers he had ever known. Aurra Sing was a specialist in Form 4 of lightsaber combat, named Ataru, an offense-focused form based on flamboyant bladework and intense integration of acrobatics and physical combat, using the entire body as a weapon. This makes sense considering that Ataru was also the primary style of Aurra's Jedi Master, Anya Kuro, and she did not spend enough time amongst the Jedi to develop her lightsaber combat further. Any extra skills she would have picked up being other fighting styles she merely hybridized into her sequences. Beyond that, Aurra was trained in the hand-to-hand martial arts style of Nagri Stava, and was highly skilled in the implementation of multiple other weapons, including a sniper rifle, blaster pistols, vibroblades, and boot knives. Her overall fighting style when it came to battling other Force wielders was a very straightforward assault, unleashing her aggressive and forensic style in an offensive assault, keeping her opponents on the back foot while cycling through her alternate weapons and Force abilities to exploit any weaknesses or advantages that she could. Sing also possessed a skill with Dun Mok tactics, consistently employing verbal taunts to belittle or undermine her opponent's emotions and leave them open for attack. However, such methods could backfire on her as they did in her duel with Asharad Het. Tactically, Aurra was similarly hit or miss. While she could be very inventive and tricky when subverting her opponents, through alternate use of weapons or Force abilities, notably blindsiding Sharad Het with several thrown rocks to open his guard so she could impale him, but she could also fall victim to her own emotional instability, and her technique could collapse into reckless abandon, such as what happened in her duels with Aayla Secura and Jax Pavin. Interestingly enough, despite being an Ataru specialist, Aurra's overall approach to combat seemed to resemble the tactics of an Iman specialist, taking the saying, "Jack of all trades, master of none," to the nth degree. And therein lied both her greatest strengths and weaknesses as a martial artist. Her unpredictability and overwhelming chaotic nature of fighting constantly left her opponents on their toes, having to react and handle everything she threw their way like a violent storm, while simultaneously having their guards disrupted by the subtle verbal warfare. On the flip side, should one or more of her tricks be disabled or countered, she could find herself being pushed back very quickly, and her emotional instability and tactical tunnel vision could leave her prone to counterattacks she couldn't afford to miss. Aurra Sing has found herself in many skirmishes with the Jedi and many more crime lords and thugs, but in analyzing her overall combative skills, we will be examining her 5 main duels against the Jedi, those being her battles with Sharad Het, Asharad Het, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, Aayla Secura, and Jax Pavin. In her duel with Sharad on Tatooine, The Jedi Master, despite having been previously injured, did succeed in holding down a grueling lightsaber battle with the Dark Jedi, where the two were evenly matched. Singh then took advantage of the stalemate, throwing several rocks and boulders at the Jedi to incapacitate him and impale him through the chest. Against Ash'arad Het, Singh was very much holding back here, wanting to toy with her prey before killing him, and using Dunmok tactics to taunt him about the death of his father. These words backfired on Singh once Het began using the dark side, and overpowered her pretty quickly. Against the master-apprentice duo of Jin and Kenobi, Aurra successfully separated the two Jedi and faced down Qui-Gon in one-on-one combat, even catching him off guard with use of a second blade in her fighting style, employing Jar-Kai dual-blade fencing. Kenobi then regrouped with the combatants, and the two Jedi successfully sent Singh into a retreat. Against Aayla Secura, the two combatants were surprisingly evenly matched, both firing verbal taunts about their respective insecurities and pasts. Such a battle broke Aurra's composure as she gave into her aggression and overextended, giving Aayla the advantage to defeat Singh and cut off her antenna. When pitted against Jax Pavin, Singh initially overwhelmed the young Jedi with little difficulty, before the Knight performed a mock version of his own technique, drawing Aurra into a false sense of security and leaning into her tunnel vision. Pavin then successfully drew the engagement to a location of his own choosing and suckered Aurra into overextending, defeating her quickly. The main pattern we can see amongst her main fights is that Singh initially holds an advantage, with her overwhelming offense before either eliminating her opponent or being countered and overpowered herself. Although it is at least worth considering that Sharad, Jin, Aayla, and Pavin were all low to mid-council level in power, and both Padawan Kenobi and Ash'arad were among the top students of their day, so Aurra's defeats are also not without silver lining. Despite both being assassins first and foremost when it came to combat, Visas Marr and Aurra Singh couldn't have been more different in their overall approach to combat. Visas was a hit-and-run ambush fighter who preferred subtlety, while Aurra was an overwhelming dervish who liked to beat her opponents into submission with as much cruelty and ruthless aggression as she could. Now, looking at the two's main weaknesses as combatants, I do think there is an interesting contrast. Aurra's overwhelming aggression could prove to be an effective counter to Visas' lightweight, serpent-like style, but by contrast, Visas' technique is also perfect for disabling and countering Aurra's many tricks and leaving her exposed, keeping defensive and subtly undermining her resolve. I doubt Aurra's use of Dunmok is going to be of any use against Marr, as the former Sith. However, Visas also doesn't employ such tactics herself, which could have been very effective against Singh. Looking at the opponents they have fought, this match still remains surprisingly even. While Aurra has faced more fighters, 4 of which are all ranging in the low to mid-council tier of power, she lost to 3 of them. And even though the Mitra Zurk that defeated Visas was disconnected from the Force at the time, she was still easily in the top 10, maybe even top 5 fighters of her era, and could have easily mollywopped both the Hets, Kenobi, and Secura without much trouble. Tactically speaking, both were relatively hit or miss. However, if Visas is unable to break Aurra's emotional instability, it could prone the Dark Jedi to employing some more of her tactical subversions, as she did against Sharad Het, which could be effective against Marr, although the consistency in which she does this is very spotty, so nothing is certain. Aurra's multi-weapon onslaught could be effective, but it's countered by Visas' intense integration of Force abilities, which we will discuss in the next round. For now though, while both opponents do hold significant advantages over the other, they also possess proper counters to defend and retaliate. I award both Visas Marr and Aurra Singh as equals, as martial artists and lightsaber duelists. Visas Marr, as previously mentioned, was primarily a Force wielder, who was trained by a master who was also primarily a Force wielder. As the personal apprentice of Darth Nihilus, one of the reigning Dark Lords of the Sith, Visas' expertise in trickery, cunning, and the dark side was second only to him, and she had access to many of the Sith's great secrets and more advanced dark side abilities, which she became very proficient in her own right with. As with all Force users, Marr was adept in Force-based physical augmentation to boost her physical stats to the superhuman levels of all trained Force wielders. In terms of skills with telekinesis, she was adept in the use of basic pushes and shoves, as well as the suffocating Force grip ability. While her own Force wall has been breached by both Darth Nihilus and Darth Traya, keep in mind that both Sith were among the most powerful Force wielders in the galaxy at that point in time. Her telepathic abilities were also quite impressive in their own right, able to read the mind of Mitra Surik and her intentions during the duel against Nihilus, and beyond that, she was capable of creating a Force bond with her master, later during their final battle using the Force suppression ability to break the link, weakening the Dark Lord. Visas also possessed an elite level of Force sense that evolved further into the ability of Farsight, sensing Mitra Surik's presence from across the galaxy prior to their first encounter, and later foresaw Surik's battle against Nihilus prior to its reality. In keeping with Almir Luca, Visas had a natural ability with Force sight, allowing her to see through her basic Force senses as opposed to her eyes. However, she took this ability one step further and developed a reverse version of it, notably using it to blind Surik during their brief duel. Marr was also adept in the Vicious Force lightning ability, capable of unleashing torrents of dark power against her opponents, and backed up her own defense by developing skill in Force deflection and Tutamentis, the ability to absorb and reflect energy, though I imagine her skill with the latter power was only capable of deflecting blaster bolts and not Force lightning or lighted blades. Adding on to her energy-based abilities was Marr's skill with Force Stun, where she would overload the opponent's nervous system and leave them paralyzed for a temporary moment. Next on her list of abilities was the Deadly Force Wound, which Visas could use to attack vital organs within an opponent and wound them. Lastly was Visas' skill in the healing arts and Force Drain. She possessed a high level of aptitude with the Dark Healing ability, and expanded further into Vital Transfer, using her own energy to heal another, which is what she performed to bring Mandalore the Preserver back from near death following his fight with Nihilus. And being the apprentice of the king of the Force Drain ability, it should come to no surprise to anyone that Visas had a basic ability with the power herself, the ability to drain the life energy of another Force wielder and absorb it into oneself. However, Visas only had a basic application of such a power, and did not have the literal planet-devouring strength of her master. Aurra Singh was just a Padawan when she was lost from the Jedi Order, her rudimentary skills growing up without completing her formal training. That being said, despite her lack of variety, Singh made up with it with her sheer power and creativity with the power she did possess. Like Visas, she had an adept skill in Force-based physical augmentation to bolster her traits to the superhuman levels of all trained Force wielders. Her overall abilities in telepathy and sense were just above average, Aurra being capable of the basic mind tricks and precognition of all Force wielders, though clearly a tier above average. And beyond that, she developed a skill with the ability of Force concealment, where a Force user would mask their Force signature from others and seemingly disappear. Aurra's ability with this power described as if she had been swallowed by shadows. Where Aurra was most adept with her skills was with telekinesis. In combat, she was successful at employing it against other Force wielders, even breaking the Force walls of Ashrad Het and Obi-Wan Kenobi, though granted both were still Padawans at the time. Beyond that, Aurra has developed her power further to being able to create force waves to scatter enemies and has used levitation to lift and hurl multiple rocks and boulders at Sharat Het. While little is known about Aurra's overall levels of defense and force walls, it is at least worth noting that none of the opponents she has faced have ever attempted to directly bypass her defenses, suggesting they were actually pretty tough. This verdict is pretty straightforward. Case in point, Visas Marr has the advantage over Aurra Sing in every single field of force power, both in development and overall power. Aurra isn't lacking, but her rudimentary powers are just so basic that she has no counter to anything Visas is bringing to the table. And even if by chance Aurra can absorb Force Lightning with her lightsaber, she has no way of defending against Force Stun, Force Wound, or especially Force Drain. And nothing she is bringing to the table is anything Visas can't or already hasn't brought to the table. I award the edge in Force abilities to Visas Marr. Let's set up our fight. Let's say it takes place upon the main levels of Coruscant, just outside the Senate building. The advantage to the winner goes 7 out of 10 times. The early fight would consist of early lightsaber combat and probing, both attempting to suss out the other with combat and counter them at every turn. I would award Aurra Sing the initial edge, as her unpredictability in combat could push Visas Marr back pretty effectively. The mid-fight is where force abilities come into play, and this is where Visas Marr holds a significant advantage. The moment she breaks off her attack and employs one of her powers, whether it be Force Flash, Lightning, Stun, or Drain, Aurra is going to be pushed back and caught off guard. She would recover and keep fighting, maybe even pulling out one of her extra weapons, but she would struggle to counter Marr's ethereal powers. The late fight could go either way, with one scenario having Aurra just being beaten down under Marr's force power, and another in which she bridges the gap between the two assassins and overwhelms Visas with her more aggressive lightsaber combat style. But in my opinion, this fight most likely ends in the mid-fight in Visas Marr's favor. Aurra is a deadly warrior, and arguably the better fighter than Marr in a straightforward sense. But between her lacking abilities in the Force, tactical tunnel vision, emotional instability, and foresight, I just don't see her being able to keep up with Marr the moment she is pitted against the Renegade Sith's more complex and powerful Force abilities. In short, I declare Visas Marr the victor. Well, that's the Versus series. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I don't know when the next Versus video will be out. Maybe another 7 years, or maybe 8. I honestly don't know. We will have a Q&A in a separate video, so don't forget to leave questions you want to be featured in that video. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.